Welcome back to the Foxy Openings video studio. I'm International Master Andrew Martin, and on this video I'm going to be presenting the Jobava London system to you. An almost entirely new method of play. Now, the advantage of the Jobava London system is mainly the lack of theory on it. Opponents can't go to the books and pull out some antidote because they simply don't exist. Players of the calibre of Magnus Carlsen have been using this system to good effect in recent years. And we're going to start with an inspiring Magnus Carlsen game. This game was played in June 2020. Incidentally, all the games on this video are going to be from 2020, so you can guarantee you're going to be presented with the latest information. And this was played in the Clutch Championships held at the Lee Chess website. Carlsen's opponent with black is Jeffrey Jong. Now let's just see the opening moves of the system, where white plays d4, black plays knight f6. Now comes knight c3. Well, when you see that move, you automatically think white's leading up to playing e4, so the majority of black players are going to stop white from playing e4. Incidentally, we will take a look at other ways for black a bit later on. And now comes bishop f4. Well, what can we call this? It has no name. It's an original queen pawn system. It's not a very soft because the bishop's not on g5. It is a kind of London system, but you wouldn't expect the knight to be on c3 at this early stage. And it's not a lead up to a black Mardima, because it's going to take white quite some time to prepare the advance e4 in this position. So it's a kind of hybrid of all these different openings, and black has original problems to solve. Now let's just go through this game as an inspiring example. And black decided to play e6. That's one of the mainline moves, very common. And black's thinking about playing c5 and getting a kind of French position, which looks as though it should be quite reasonable for him. Anyway, Carlsen played e3. An audacious alternative here is knight to b5. I mean, that looks ridiculous, doesn't it? It looks like a duffer's move, as Tarash would describe it. But there's a sound positional basis behind it, and that is that black has got to protect c7 somehow, and the only reasonable way to do it, without giving up the bishop pair, is to play knight a6. And after that, the knight on a6 is on a very bad circuit. So whilst white loses time here, after c6, well, the knight's got to go back to c3. The knight on a6 is very badly placed. And yes, black has gained a move, but is it the type of move he wants to gain? Somehow he's got to get that knight back onto a decent circuit. And practice has shown that white's chances are pretty good here. Anyway, going back to our featured game, Carlsen obviously doesn't like that and prefers to play e3. Jean cuts out any idea of knight b5 straight away by playing his bishop to b4, and white sensibly plays knight e2. So already we're a little bit off the beaten track. It is a queen's pawn game, but it's a very unusual one. And knight e2 just simply says, well, I'm going to play a3, and then you've got to decide what you're going to do with your bishop. Anyway, black castled. White did indeed play a3, and Jean dropped back with the bishop to e7. He's certainly thinking about moves like c5 quite quickly, and then knight c6, queen b6, getting a kind of French defence position. Now, Carlsen's next move is extraordinary, and you never be able to guess it. He played knight g1, undevelopment. It looks ridiculous, but the knight on e2 was gumming up the works for white, so white simply gets it to a better square. Again, this looks like a loss of time, but I urge you to consider what happens in the game. And certainly here, black is being given original problems to solve. He's on his own. He's got to solve the problems of this very strange position. Jean came up with knight h5. And Carlsen, perhaps slightly surprisingly, decided to surrender the bishop with d takes c5. Black whipped off the bishop. White takes back, and now bishop takes c5. Bishop d3. Seems to me Carlsen aims for an harmonious position in the opening for his pieces. Doesn't worry too much about whether he's better or not. He just tries to get a harmonious position. And one of the ideas of the Jobava London system is to start a kingside attack. So you begin to wonder whether actually white is threatening the Greek gift sacrifice in this position. For instance, if black plays knight c6, can white get away with bishop takes h7 check? That was certainly in the back of Zhong's mind as he blocked the white attack by playing g6. But that runs straight into Carlsen's attacking move h4. And you're going to see this type of kingside attack is very common in the Jobava London system. Certainly against unsuspecting black players, there's a very good chance that white could land a big punch using this idea. Well, I mean, it's fairly straightforward. White was going to play h5 and then open the h-file and try and make black's king. Black developed, perhaps not quite believing in what white was doing. And it certainly looks that as though black has got a decent position here. He's defending his king and he's attacking the pawn on f4. Carlsen defended with queen to d2. And now black struck out with e5. Well, perhaps he didn't need to do that, but I guess white was threatening to castle on the queen side and then just to go for broke on the h-file. It's not rocket science. So black decides to break that up by sacrificing a pawn. Does it work? We will see. Carlsen takes the pawn. Black attacks the knight and white defends his knight. So for the time being, white has been talked out of the immediate opening of the h-file, and now black even gets to regain his pawn by taking on f4. But castle's on the queen side. It seems that white can get a vicious attack here without his dark square bishop, which is quite unusual. Of course, the dark square bishop for black is on c5 rather than g7. And this, as we're going to see in the upcoming play, makes a big difference. Well, Carlsen wastes no time opening up the king, and now the knight comes into g5. He knows he can't hang around because black's counter-attack is also quite strong. Bishop f5 was played, and now in came the knight to h7. Very direct play by Magnus Carlsen. Rook fd8, Zhong saves his rook, but now knight check, king f8, rook h8 check, and the finish is not difficult to work out. Rook h7 check, king f8, and now Carlsen swings his rook across to h1. And black had nothing better than to resign because, well, white's threatening checkmate in two moves, starting with rook h8 check. So that was a quick win for Magnus Carlsen against a very strong opponent, and a good example of the kingside attack, the swift kingside attack that white can bring to bear using this very unusual opening system.